Joining us now is Niall O'Connor, journalist with The Journal, who has been covering the Limerick Circuit Court case that saw 4 serving Gardaí and a retired superintendent found not guilty of perverting the course of justice following an 8-week trial. The 5 accused had denied 39 charges of unlawfully interfering in road traffic prosecutions on dates between October 2016 and September 2019. Niall, thanks very much for joining us on the show.
Good morning.
Niall, can you tell us more, outline the case for us and why it attracted so much attention?
Yeah, I suppose this investigation has gone on for close to a decade now in Limerick City, and I suppose we have to be somewhat careful about what we say here because there is particular legal reasons. But what I can say is that, about a decade ago, an investigation began. It was a separate probe, a separate investigation into allegations of Gardaí passing information to a criminal group. Involved in that investigation was a then Superintendent Eamon O'Neill. Now, he was cleared of any wrongdoing. There was no evidence. He did absolutely nothing wrong arising out of that investigation. But phones were seized in that investigation, and when those phones were examined, there were, we'll say, text messages and other communications in regard to members of the public contacting Eamon O'Neill to, we'll say, quash or, as it's known in the Guards, square road traffic tickets. Now, what happened then was that the NBCI, the National Bureau of Criminal Investigation, they then began an investigation into that, and that's how we got to the trial yesterday with the 4 serving Gardaí and 1 retired Garda being cleared.
What kind of evidence did the jury hear over their 8-week trial, or what kind of evidence can you tell us about?
Very, very detailed evidence. Now, they heard from, we'd say, analysts who examined mobile phones. They heard from the investigating detectives about, how the phones were seized, what was found on it. But they also heard very detailed information about very, very technical aspects of Garda life, really, around this concept of discretion, in which Gardaí have a common law power to be able to say at the side of the road, look, I'm not prosecuting, it's kind of like, we'd say, enforcement through education idea, or for that matter, that discretion can. And so the jury then had to decide, really, I suppose, they had to decide whether that discretion continues from the roadside throughout the process, and, whether or not a Garda could square a ticket after being contacted by somebody else. And that's essentially how the case was decided.
Why was the state so determined to pursue this case, despite, on the face of it, the relatively minor nature of the original offences?
It is very minor, yeah. Like it's all very minor road traffic matters. But for whatever reason, the state decided it was going to treat this like a massive, massive crime. Jerry Mahon, who people may know as he was the former chief superintendent in Limerick City, and Jerry said that, look, this was never a criminal matter. This was a discipline matter. But ultimately, the reason why they went at it, I suppose, is that if we look at maybe 10 years ago, we'd say the Morrissey McCabe scandal. Now, Morrissey McCabe was a Garda sergeant in the border areas of the country, and he had complained about, we'd say, the cancelling of penalty point offences. And arising out of that, there was a kind of a fervour nationally in governance that, something would have to be done about this in the Guards. And, there was an anti-corruption unit set up at the same time. And for whatever reason, Gardaí in Limerick were the focus of, we'd say, an investigation that was obviously constructed by whoever to target this idea of cancelling or squaring of these minor road traffic offences.
Ultimately, what question, Niall, did the jury have to answer when deciding on guilt or innocence?
They had to decide whether this was legal or not legal, whether the Gardaí themselves who were participating in this had the power to do it. And ultimately they came back and clearly decided that, discretion was was permitted by these Gardaí, that Gardaí could continue to do, we'll say, that kind of pragmatic style of policing that we all know. Everybody, you can hear by my accent, I'm not from a city myself. This is kind of the rural town type policing where people are given an opportunity to explain themselves at the side of the road. It isn't this draconian, straight in policing that we may see in other jurisdictions. So the jury ultimately heard all the evidence, and it was decided by them clearly that, the use of discretion by these Gardaí was not illegal.
And how significant do you think the unanimous not guilty verdict that was returned was on all 39 charges?
I think it is hugely significant, and it may inform how the state goes at these sort of issues. Looking back, and you look back to the start of the investigation and the amount of resources that have been used, it probably is going to cost the state, several millions to pay for this trial. It does seem to be, we'll say, there's a concept in law about proportionality. It does seem to be disproportionate. So perhaps now in the future, the state and the Garda organisation may have to look at whether or not, sending down, we'll say, an elite detective unit to a place outside of Dublin to investigate these sort of things may be disproportionate. I think that's particularly it. There is other issues around this that, for legal reasons, I won't be able to cover, but I think in time it will become clear what those issues are and how it may feed into those issues.
We've seen the GRA calling this a witch hunt, which is very, very strong criticism, Niall.
Extremely strong criticism. They're not alone, though. I mean, we say, Alan Kelly, who's a very vocal critic of Garda management, he's been out very strong as well. Dan O'Gorman, one of the solicitors for the defence, he had also said, that he would support calls for public inquiry. I don't think this is going away anytime soon. I think it's going to have to be looked at. I think this morning, I'm sure there are people in offices in Dublin who are trying to figure out what way to go on this. But I think the fact that GRA called this a witch hunt, the evidence does slightly support that. I mean, the idea that you have still got Gardaí in Limerick City who are suspended, who were found by the DPP to have done nothing wrong, but yet the Garda organisation continues to suspend them. That's 6 years since that process began for them, and you would have to raise significant questions about, the administrative law aspect of this, about fair procedure and about delay. And I think that certainly is there's going to have to be questions there. The only difficulty I see here is that at some level, because it's Gardaí, I believe, people, aren't asking the same level of questions that they may ask if it was other sections of society.
Just finally, Niall, given that, the strong comments from the GRA, and you've mentioned Alan Kelly and Donna Gorman there as well, those calls for a public inquiry, and given, I suppose, the publicity this case has garnered, is that, do you think, more likely to make a public inquiry happen?
I suppose they're probably going to try and avoid public inquiry because they've already spent absolutely millions on a failed trial. I think, I would envisage that there are going to be serious questions asked from the Dáil on this. Alan Kelly isn't alone as a TD that's raising it. There's Deputy Crowe there as well, who has been speaking overnight about it. Whether or not we're going to see a public inquiry, I don't know. I think there'll be a fair factor there for cost. There is, I will say to the listeners, there is more to come out on this. There is much more to this story than just what happened yesterday. Even though yesterday we'll say, had a huge gravitational pull, there is more to come. And I think as more comes out about this, it will start to look more and more like a scandal. And I think that's when perhaps we might get to see this public inquiry.
OK, well, look, we appreciate you telling us what you can tell us at this point in time. Niall O'Connor, journalist with the Journal, appreciate you joining us on Morning Focus. Thank you very much.